Mindfully breathing in, mindfully breathing out. Try to sustain the awareness of breathing, the awareness of your breathing, distinct awareness of your breathing as it comes in, as it goes out. Awareness continuously, uninterruptedly. Restfully, calmly observing your breath. If possible, natural, normal breathing. But if you can't work with natural, normal breathing because you can't feel, you can't experience it, then use slightly forceful breathing, deep breathing. Anchor your experience, anchor your awareness directly on experiencing the breath, the experience of the breath as it comes in, as it goes out. Various thoughts will arise in the mind. If they arise naturally, let them arise naturally. But without being frustrated, disappointed. Just realize, just recognize the fact that your mind wanders away. Aware of the arising of the thoughts. Patiently, persistently, come back on breathing again. Distinct awareness of breath. Distinct awareness of breath. Don't move with breathing externally into the world, internally into your body. Just focus your whole attention right at the entrance of your nose, above your upper lip, or even inside the walls of the nostrils, steadfastly anchored. Every time you realize your mind wanders, you need to bring it back patiently, persistently. Various thoughts will interrupt you, and you may feel like too much. Your mind is not good enough for meditation. But you can't give up that easily. At least you're aware that your mind is wandering, jumping from one thought to another. That's awareness. Awareness is very crucial because you can see where the problem lies. The oscillation, the agitation of mind. Therefore, you even have to work harder to bring your mind to rest calmly, quietly. So the agitation goes away. And gradually, even wandering of mind will go away, so that you can steadfastly, single-pointedly focus on breathing longer stretch of time. Unnecessary thought process, wandering mind. It's just a waste full of your energy, your mental energy. So conserve your mental energy just by focusing on the breath, by sharpening your faculty, strengthening your memory skill, your concentration skill. Developing sustained awareness of your breathing very patiently. Very patiently. Okay, thank you. Okay.
I can just say the audio is very good today. Audio seems much
good.
better.
Okay.
microphones and things. So thank you
Maybe
so
this
much.
one.
Yeah, I think works very nice. Thank
Magic
you.
of Apple devices.
Yes.
Oh, good.
Thank
So maybe then I will consistently use this one
you.
instead of relying on the Cuban university supplies.
Okay, thank you.
Perhaps it's not so reliable. Okay. Do we have questions, Lindy?
Nobody sent me any questions. So at this stage.
Yeah, probably more questions from today onward, because when we start looking for the actual text,
Yeah.
and which is our aim. Okay.
Yeah, so I've just written in the chat that people can put their virtual hand up if they want, I guess. Or would you prefer we wait to the end of the session for questions, or we do something throughout?
I think, I mean, if you have a question pops up when we were discussing going through a certain section, it would be actually a good idea to raise there and then.
Okay.
But if you feel like waiting, of course.
Okay. Wonderful. We'll do that.
So let's teaching. Public teaching. 2021. Okay. So let me share the sutra, and I hope you guys did get some time to read at least the first two. I read that first two chapters again, I think, and particularly second chapter has a fairly lot of material. So I don't think we would be able to go beyond first two chapters and see what will happen. But I suppose I will basically we'll assume that you get time to enjoy those two chapters at least. Yeah, of course, lots of materials there, and hopefully, we will get to enjoy it. Okay, so what I'm going to do, I will enter this full mode. Can you let me know, Lindy? Are you seeing it properly now?
Yes, very good. Thank you.
Oh, great. Okay. Right. So essentially, I think if you start from the first chapter, introduction, but before I do that, I will basically go back to the summary. So at least chapter summary, so that we get the gist of the chapter before we read into it. And hopefully, I think we won't, I mean, the idea is not to spend too much time in the first chapter. We're already in the, okay. Translation. Yeah, so here you could see in the first chapter, and the chapter reads as follows. The Buddha is on a vulture peak with a great assembly when he emits a ray of light from his urna hair that illuminates 18,000 Buddha realms in the east, making all the beings there visible to assembly. At that point, of course, I think as we discussed last week, or in the previous session, all of us would be, I assume, are familiar with vulture peak. And remember, the vulture peak is at least tentative location where Buddha turned the second wheel of Dharma. That's the way Buddha gave teachings associated perfection of wisdom sutras, particularly what we call Diamond Sutra. And nowadays, in ancient time, probably the place is given a vulture peak because it looks as if there are certain vultures standing. And we were talking about a Buddha's attendant, or at least people who are participating Buddha's grand sermon. Of course, there are thousands of arahants, thousands of bodhisattvas. But now, of course, if you go and see the location, it's kind of tiny, small. Hardly 100% can fit on the top. But of course, that doesn't mean that that with the same place could have changed dramatically, and that might some resemblance. And at least we can see some rocks, sort of. And if you look far away, it does look like some sort of vultures sitting. I mean, those of you who are familiar with the Tibetan sky burial and seen enough vultures, and you can see how they sit, and they're pretty massive individual, enormous wings. Anyway, and that's where that is the location where the sutra is set in. Now, of course, the important thing is Buddha has this particular quality, one of those remarkable feature of great beings. And it is said that this urna has a special, of course, significance, particularly one with a particular hair, and that from that part of his body, he basically illuminates. Light comes, and that light illuminates entire cosmos. And we are not talking about this universe that we are familiar with, so-called Earth, but actually galaxies. And it is, from Buddhist standpoint, of course, this view of multi-galaxies, multi-universe is not a strength, not a new idea. Of course, it's always there. And there are other justifications why that conception is important. So ideally, or at least technically, if something happens to this world and it becomes totally inhabitable, and then you could ask, where would those beings would go? Well, from Buddhist standpoint, anywhere within the universe which actually inhabits or which are sustainable, which would sustain life. So the reason being that because we, even though what sustains life, the world, the earth at the moment sustains our life, but if it becomes unsustainable, but still we would have karma. Remember this karmic cycle. As long as our karma is completely annulled, and then existence becomes impossible. And that's what sometimes, of course, one of the definition of nibbana is to repeat the cycle of existence. Now, as long as we have a karmic fuel and habits within us to continue this cycle, doesn't matter whether we, even if this earth becomes inhabitable, some place in the distant galaxy will be ripe for life to sustain. So that's generally the kind of theory or assumption behind multi-universe. So essentially, when Buddha basically emit this, he basically illuminate all the lights. And remember, we're not talking about this earth, but also different celestial realms and a lot more. Of course, they are total, for us, it is totally invisible because we don't see them. But the celestial lives, even though we describe them as bodiless, formless, but they are not completely formless. They are still associated with material because the air that is especially the subtle air, the subtle sustaining, life-sustaining breath. That's a technical term in Buddhist or Indian Buddhist language. But now, of course, we would say oxygen. So the oxygen has to be there all the time in order for, especially even the subtle oxygen has to be there in order for even the subtlest level of consciousness to exist. So in a sense, even though they are called form realms and formless realms where the gods exist, but they are nevertheless not entirely formless, technically, even though they are beyond our, of course, access. Okay. So and then what happens is Maitreya asks Manjushri what this meant. Now remember, of course, Maitreya and Manjushri were two of Buddha's most prominent disciples. Manjushri excels wisdom, intelligence, and Maitreya is the future Buddha, right? Ajita is another word that Manjushri used often to address Maitreya. Maitreya. Occasionally, of course, we will see Maitreya being used, but when Manjushri addressed him, sometimes he used the word Ajita. Anyway, Manjushri knows what's happening, but Maitreya doesn't know what's happening. Even though it looks like in the past he might have actually been through the similar experience, but somehow his memory wasn't as sharp as Manjushri. So as Maitri asks, what is that meant? What is about to happen? So Manjushri states that it is an omen that the Buddha is going to teach the white lotus of the God, good Dharma. So generally, of course, we will say Lotus Sutra. So that sign that Buddha is going to give a very important sermon, and that the sermon of the Lotus Sutra. And apparently, in one of his previous existences, he saw another Buddha was doing the same thing. So therefore, Manjushri states that it is omen that the Buddha is going to teach the white lotus of the good Dharma, good Dharma. Manjushri knows this because he had been the same thing, had seen the same thing occur in the previous eon. So that's and now, of course, the Manjushri wasn't Manjushri in the past. Of course, he was the same continuum, but has a different name. So he was called Shirgarbha, and he has actually two names. Of course, in the previous eon, he was a Shirgarbha, also known as Varaprapa. And both Manjushri, current Manjushri and Maitreya were, of course, the disciple of Buddha Chandrasurya Pradipa, right? So essentially, when Buddha Chandrasurya Pradipa illuminates this light, there was, of course, Manjushri present. So therefore, of course, he is able to illuminate what is happening here. Okay, so that's the summary of the first chapter, right? And then in the second chapter, which we will, you might need to come back just to make sure what we are, because sometimes when a chapter is so big, we get lost. What's happening? So if it is very very useful for us to refer back again this brief summary introduction to help us to situate, help us where we are heading. All right, so let's go to the first chapter then and see what's happening there. Okay, that is, can I go? Is there any quick way I can do? Is it? Okay, so I have to go slow way. Usually there is a way I can do it, but if I share, I lose that flexibility to jump from here and there. Anyway, okay, so here is the chapter 1. Now, what we're going to do, of course, we won't be able to read the whole chapter, so it's not possible because it's very long. And our idea is to jump from here and there. And I will basically, we will refer to chapters or sections that are useful, or at least more informative about the sutra, and where the actual discourse, Buddhist discourses are happening. So we'll start with this one, of course. So chapter 1 is more or less like introduction for the whole thing, because that's actually basically Buddha illuminates this, and then nothing happens. And of course, then whole description of what are the illuminated or because of the light being emitted from Buddha's Udana, whole galaxies get illuminated, and basically description of various types of galaxies and different level of existence that is being described here. So we don't have to go through all of it. But here you can see homage to the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas. This is usually the translators. When the Tibetans have translated Sanskrit texts into Sanskrit texts in Tibetan, of course, translators, not only, of course, Tibetans are involved, but also many Indian Pandits are involved in translating this text, of course. So when they do that, of course, they usually to mark to mark the occasion as a you could say good omen, also to set their motivation right, so that whatever the text that they're going to translate is going to benefit other beings. They always remember the kindness of Buddha and Bodhisattvas, because after all, if you are not inspired by the kindness in both Buddhas and Bodhisattvas, or it doesn't have to be Buddhas and Bodhisattvas, but you could be, let's say, a friend of yours who actually inspires you, and then sometimes it's a good idea to actually remember. And this is a very important practice, at least in even in meditation. So, for example, if you need those of us who are Vipassana meditators, you start with a brief meditation on reflecting the kindness of Buddha and Bodhisattvas. That's why you recite a little bit in the beginning, invoking Buddhas and Bodhisattvas and inviting them to actually witness what is happening. And that's partly to remember their kindness. And that also helps to subdue one's own ego and egocentricity and arrogance. Because after all, what you have realized, what you know, is entirely because of the gratitude, or because of the work of Buddhas and Bodhisattvas, or ones, so what we call Kalyan Mitras, or spiritual friends. So that's what they are doing when they take. So that also help us to set the motivation right, and also because of that are also supposed to be beneficial to have a work accomplished. So sometimes we start a work, and then in the middle something happens, and then of course we won't be complete. So in the end, there is also at least some sort of tentative reason why this refuge is good in the beginning. And then of course at the end you again dedicate whatever merits that you have accumulated. And that's what we do, of course, when we in this study session. We also dedicate our merits for the beings who might be interested in this path, but also if because of the opportunity we got, of course, the marvelous opportunity to study the sutra, and you also with a positive mind, may other beings also have the similar fortune to actually study this and then gradually develop themselves, and especially and then become Buddhas and Bodhisattvas, Arhats, so that they be free from this cyclic existence. So that's why a homage usually is important, but at the same time, the dedication is at the end is particularly important too. So that you just don't leave the positive energy that you have generated just limiting to yourself, but you basically extend to the good of others. And usually the analogy is given. One of the analogy, or the reason why dedication is good is you can think about the dedication as more like you get, okay, I have a cup of water. If I just sip it and drink it, basically, if something happens to me, my body dries up completely. Until then, actually, some part of this water is going to remain, right? Whereas if I spill this water on the floor, maybe within few hours, it would be dry up. And whereas if I go and take this bottle of water, glass of water and put it or mix it with a Derwent River, imagine that is going to remain. At least some particle of that water molecule will remain until unless the whole ocean dries up. So that's the motivation. So in the end, when you actually generate and dedicate your good karmas, good energy, positive energy that you have generated for the well-being beings, you basically make that kind of impact. So that's the idea. Now, whether it truly happens or not, it might be difficult because it's one of the very hard questions. But at least there is a reason for that, and that is an important argument, and this reason why dedication actually matters in the end. Okay, so then the actual sutta begins like this. Thus have I heard at one time that Bhagavan was dwelling on the water peak in Rajgaha together with the great Sangha of 1,200 bhikshus. 1,200 bhikshus. Bhikshus is a word for monks, right? We are talking about fully ordained monks. And it doesn't say any bhikshunis, but I suspect, of course, they should be also bhikshunis too. Remember, Buddha is the first teacher in the world who actually has a complete Sangha community, both from fully ordained monks, fully ordained nuns, and the lay disciples, both male and female. And there are, of course, many prominent female monastics. But unfortunately, suttas, whoever was responsible for recording, compiling those sutras, many of them leave aside bhikshunis. So you might raise some issue there, but maybe because of the patriarchal problem, or patriarchal, as you could see actually, because of the patriarchy, particularly after Buddha's passing away, patriarchy within Buddhist tradition becomes a pretty, dominant, and they might have maybe fundamentally responsible for why that we have no longer bhikshuni. Bhikshuni tradition, even if I was never introduced in Tibet, and you could ask a question, of course, and that might have its problematic answer, but nevertheless, yes, you can see probably one of the reasons why here even the bhikshunis don't show up, only bhikkhus. But another word, another sort of slight, there might be kind of excuse, but bhikshus, sometimes this word actually has a wider semantic range. In other words, it has a wider meaning, and within that wider meaning, bhikshus means one who practices. So which means it could actually encompass both monks, lay people, as well as monks, as well as males and females both. So you could actually think this way. And this might be also one other explanation. I see many of the Theravada teachers, like Bodhi Bhikkhu, when he say bhikkhu, right? Not bhikshu, bhikkhu in Pali. A bhikkhu basically means essentially beg, to beg. So that's put it bluntly, it's almost like beggar, and that doesn't have to be any gender base. The point is that it could have, you could be in both male as well as female, and both monastic as well as lay people. Anyway, all who were solely arhats, defilements had ceased, and who were without kleshas. So that's the point. So these bhikkhus, these practitioners, or the Buddha students, let's put them Buddha students, they're all liberated individuals. So liberation, sometimes, of course, we always people always misunderstand what the liberation is, what nirvana is. They tend to see nirvana as if some sort of a state up in the space, and where you go. There is no such a thing. Buddha's enlightenment or moksha and nirvana are not a state, some sort of metaphysical state that you jump. Essentially, basically means you or any being. Remember, amongst Buddha's disciples, there are arahants, or fully liberated individuals, and they're living in, and they have a body, they have a mind, all of them together. But what they don't have are the things that we have, namely pleasures. So they have no defilements, which means that you could say they're free from three poisons: poison of anger, poison of attachment. You cannot exploit them in any other way. You can't make them angry. You can pit them, you can beat them, or do anything, and you will see that you won't be able to manipulate them. You cannot exploit them in any other way, or you can't tempt them because they are lust free. So that's the true mark of being liberated, or a free person. And the reason why these individuals are free from lust or passion and aversion is because they have eradicated ignorance or the confusion with respect to their own existence. Because when you meditate, and this is what happens, meditation is all about self-disciplining, self-training, and self-learning. You basically study about yourself. That's what you do, meditation. Meditation is not just zooming out. Meditation is not taking rest. Meditation is developing awareness, alertness, so that basically you study about your life, your own mind. Nobody can do it for us. And that's why you can see later on, Buddha says, Buddha's teaching is so difficult, technical, because it is Buddha's enlightenment is something that he alone can experience. And in the sense that experience Buddha had, Shakyamuni had, is totally inexplicable, because no experience can be shared. No, that type of experience can be shared. And the reason why Buddha says this is because each one of us has to actually go through an experience and free ourselves of those defilements individually. And that path is a very kind of a solo program. Of course, we will need all the help that we can get from our teachers, from the community, with terms of living, for example, from the shelter. But when it comes to really attaining true realization, true liberation, it is this program that help us to develop the skills that we acquire, psychological, cognitive skills. So it is with these developments that defilements can be get rid of, and therefore these beings, of course, whose defilements had ceased, who were without kleshas. Klesha is Sanskrit name for defilements. Who had mastered themselves. Now here, so you can ask, who is the master of themselves? The master of themselves is somebody who we cannot actually exploit. Now, and remember, I occasionally make this statement that when Buddha gave his teaching, in the initial stage, Buddha doesn't allow his students to go by themselves, whether it's a male or female. If you're an ordinary being like us, Buddha wouldn't say, don't go alone. Always be with 2 or 3 minimum, because it is easy that you can be tempted. So if you are a monk, a beautiful woman shows up, and then because you are, you could be easily tempted because of you are not free from lust or passion, very easy to exploit. Or if you are very, let's say, passionate in the sense of very angry, so much of anger within you, you can be easily exploited there, because somebody do you something and it make you so angry, then basically can be easily manipulated. And then, so as long as we remain ordinary beings, Buddha says, be in the community. Always to work in two. When you go and bag food, go in 2s, 3s, but not single. But then once you become arahant, become fully liberated, then Buddha says, now you are like a lion, you are like a tiger. Things anyone can beat you physically, but that person won't be able to stir you up psychologically. So therefore, that's the true master, right? That's what we call free will. If there is a free will, that is the free will, true sign of independence, true sign of freedom, true signs of mastery. And those arahants have attained that mastery. So he says, who had mastered themselves, who had liberated their minds, who had completely liberated wisdom, who were noble beings, who were great elephants. Now here, even they use words elephants, because elephants are massive and very strong. So in a sense, these beings have a very, very strong, cultured mind, so that there is no way that you can harm them psychologically. That's the true beauty of true aim of Buddhist teaching. And the reason why we practice is precisely actually with that aim in our mind. And this word, in fact, is an interesting. In other words, this noble being, arahant, right, or arya. Arya, anarya and arya, they're opposite. So anarya basically means ignoble, just like ordinary beings could be, like us, could be very easily manipulated. Because we become, say, if somebody says us a nasty word, we can be easily triggered psychologically. So if somebody uses racist language, we get triggered. All you need to do is use a slur, and then that's it. We basically jump, and we can be very easily manipulated. That reason is because the reason is not because of the external stimulus, the certain external stimulus there, but because of our internal reactive tendency, and that's the called karmic tendency. Now, whole Buddhist program of meditation is actually designed to for the individual to overcome that weakness, so that in the end you become master of yourself, that you attain the mastery, and that you are no longer being able to be victimized by any being. So you can see those are the type of disciples Buddha had, right? Who were great elephants, who had done what they had to be done, who had accomplished what had to be accomplished, who had put down their burdens. Now this is the burden. We tend to think sometimes, of course, when we think of the burden, we are thinking of the burden as a load. But the most important burden that we have is actually our desires, our kleshas or afflictions, and sometimes could be on or from the Arahant point of view, these 5 aggregates constituted or created by our defilements. Now, so somebody, if once you laid out all your afflictions, the burden is gone. You are a free individual, very light, mentally very light. So at that moment, you may not need to sleep, because your mind is constant rest. So that's why, in fact, remember, one of the epithets of Buddha is the somebody who never sleeps, who wakes up, stays awake throughout the night. World goes to sleep, the enlightened being stays awake. The reason being is because this person don't have any psychological toxicity, and if you're fully liberated from psychological toxicity, there is nothing that burdens a mind, and therefore, literally, awakening is unburdening in that sense. And who had reached their goals, because the goal is to become truly independent in the sense, right? Remember, of course, we cannot be physically independent. You have to rely on the society and food and other things that provide. But it is psychological freedom. But that psychological freedom depends on the wisdom that we cultivate, the cognitive virtues that we cultivate. And that's why mindfulness, concentration, wisdom, all these cultivations, so that the particular skills that we have to cultivate are very important. Okay. Anyway, I think I got stuck there for too long. So these are the type of disciples basically present when Buddha displays these miraculous, emit his miraculous light. So he says, at that time, Bhagavan, surrounded by 4-fold disciples, assembly were esteemed, honored, revered, respected, offered, and of course, those disciples surrounding Buddha, they sit. Not only that, of course, they pay respect. Okay, so now and then 1.9 and 1.8, sitting cross-legged on the Dharma seat, he entered the samādhi named the state of infinite instruction. His body became motionless, and his mind became more motionless. Now, this is an interesting word, because sometimes motionless, remember, the mind is completely at work, full at work, but motionless in the sense that at the moment when you meditate, your mind is always in motion, constantly jumping here and there, always racing, and you have to bring it back again and again. At a certain time, when we practice enough, mind is able to sit there just where you live. Namely, if you're focusing on the breath, it is possible that you can just observe and sit and with pure awareness, and that's the mindfulness with motionless mind, in a sense. Now, of course, that motionless doesn't mean that there is no activity. There is actually full alertness and understanding. The motionless in the sense that there is no thought, discursive thinking that actually come and interrupt. Okay. But then here, 1.11 says, then at that time, a light ray shone from the Urna hair between the Bhagwan's eyebrows into the 18,000 Buddha realms. So remember, 18,000 Buddha realms. We're talking about, this is the type of galaxies that we're talking about. They all got illuminated. And the Buddha realms, the reason why they are called Buddha realms is, Buddhas, of course, as you will, if you go down a little bit further, you will notice that there is one and the only aim for the Buddhas to come back into the world. And they said that is actually to make sure that the beings, matured beings, are on the path of full awakening. Because their sole aim, they are liberated. They really, remember, their goal is achieved. For themselves, there is nothing to be achieved. But for the reason they have to come back is because they see they are in need. And that need is to make sure that beings who require his assistance or her assistance are given that assistance. So, okay. Now, so if you go a bit further, and you can see, okay, so now here is 1.13. Then the Bodhisattva Mahasattva Maitreya thought. This is Maitreya, future Buddha, had a thought in occurs when he starts seeing all the illumination, of course. Remember, these are very mature bodhisattvas whose wisdom eye is open, not like ours. In our case, our flesh eye is open, and it has a very limited vision. You can only see the things that are solid, things that are some sort of visible. But when your wisdom eye opens, then you have even within the domain of your vision, you are able to see not only this earth that we consider this our existential state or habitat, but you are able to see much more. So then, of course, having that kind of vision, Maitreya thought, oh, Tathagata has shown this great miraculous sign. Why did the book Bhagwan show this kind of a great miraculous sign? So he wondered, he really wondered, why is this? What is so special today? The fact that Buddha has this doing his miracles, because usually, remember, Buddha discourage his students from even showing miracles. But somehow today he did. Now, this word of Bhagwan is another word. You will see, in fact, our teacher sometimes pejoratively says in the 20th century, in fact, nowadays, Bhagwan is like a monsoon frog jumping from anywhere. And because in the monsoon season, a lot of frogs you will see coming from all sides. Just like in this century, there are so many Bhagwans giving themselves. We have Tasmania. In Tasmania, we have Bhagwan, one Bhagwan anyway. And the Malakit has a long name. He calls himself Bhagwan. We got, even in a small island, we got a Bhagwan. So it could be a monsoon frog. Oh, sorry, maybe I shouldn't be saying that. I might be in trouble. Anyway, the most particular term, actually, Chomdende, literally means somebody who have completely destroyed the defilements. So technically, that's the word. Somebody who has completely destroyed the defilements. And defilements, remember those 3 key poisons. Once all these 3 poisons are eliminated, then of course all the secondary defilements such as resentment, hate, depression, sorrow, anxiety, all these are secondary and they will automatically go. But those 3 root has to be eliminated, and that's the qualification, minimum qualification for somebody to be a Bhagwan. So of course, in this case, Maitreya thought, why is it that Bhagwan has actually emitted this particular miracle today, performed this particular miracle? Who can answer my question as to what this happened? So of course, he doesn't know himself. So and so basically, he wasn't sure who to answer. But then he said, this he remembered this Manjushri Kumara Buddha has served previous jinas. Jina means Buddhas, victors. Another word for jina in Sanskrit means victors, essentially victorious. The one who is victorious. Has planted the roots of merit, has attended many Buddhas. This Manjushri Kumara Buddha has also previously seen this kind of sign from the past. Tathagatas means thus gone beyond, one who has transcended the cyclic existence, if you like. Arahats, perfectly enlightened beings, and has previously heard numerous accounts of great Dharma. I should ask Manjushri. So Maitreya thought, well, if there's anyone who can actually explain what is happening, it would be Manjushri, because Manjushri has attended so many previous Buddhas, and one of occasions, he might have experienced this. Okay. Then others, along with Maitreya, the others also thought the same. Whom shall we ask? Now I'm reading here 1.14. Whom shall we ask about this great miraculous sign revealed by the book Bhagavan? So remember, you have different epithets. Bhagavan is one epithet, Buddha, Tathagata is another epithet. Usually, I think in most of the texts, people, some translators like to use, or at least compilers use to use word Tathagata. But here, of course, Bhagavan is also used. Then the Bodhisattva Mahasattva Maitreya instantaneously know the thoughts in the mind of the fourfold assembly and inquired the Manjushri Kumara Buddha. Basically, when other people are also having the same doubt who to ask, Manjushri, of course, read their thoughts among the disciples, and then Maitreya read their thoughts and then asked Manjushri. Manjushri was okay. Fourfold assembly inquired the Manjushri Kumara Buddha. Manjushri, what was the cause and what was the reason for the Bhagavan manifesting this wonderful illumination through a marvelous, astonishing, miraculous light that revealed these 18,000 beautiful, supremely beautiful Buddha realms, among which are the Tathagatas and also the followers of Tathagatas. So essentially, of course, with the light, because it illuminated whole galaxies of the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas. So the question was put to Manjushri. And Manjushri, for what reason did this guide of man emit this single ray of light, this great illuminating light from the urna hair between his eyebrows? Now, of course, we can actually make a reference to the light that you can see in Tasmania. We still see the light in Mona. Very strong, powerful. Of course, there are lots of, maybe about at least 100 different lights. And then if you look from distance, or as if there is just one single light, shooting into the middle of eyes, middle of the space, literally. We went there quite close enough. We were just curious to see. And it must be very powerful because you can see from far away. And in fact, from the Black Man's Bay, I think you can sometimes see it, especially in the middle of night. Anyway, basically, this single ray of light is strong enough to illuminate all these things. Okay, so that question was put to Manjushri, and then basically rejoicing devas, and then of course there's a whole lot of other descriptions that we won't have time to read. Trent, yes, I see your hand.
Sonam, can you hear me okay?
Yes, I can hear you, please.
Oh, good. I was just going to ask, is the reason that Maitreya is the premier sort of listener or pupil because he's the next Buddha? Is that why, or does that make sense, that question? The reason that he's featured so prominently there,
yep,
is because he's the next Buddha to come?
I could actually, with all honesty, really don't know the answer. I mean, explicit answer. But yes, I can speculate that is a possible reason why he, of course, he's one of the more prominent disciples. But also he plays a major, significant role precisely because he's already very mature and he's going to be the future Buddha. So therefore, in this and many other sutras, one of the main interlocutors is going to be Manjushri and Maitreya Buddha. So I didn't, of course, in the sutta, of course, there is nothing explicit that answers your question, right? But what we can understand, or at least speculate or conjecture, is because of his future role, because of his future role as being the Buddha, he's in a sense giving enough training by this Buddha to take the important role that he will have to take in the future. So yes, I think short answer is what you thought. because of his future position that he's going to discover the technique. Remember, they discover the technique himself, just as Shakyamuni Buddha did. Again, go through all the process, all the penances and everything, because by then Buddha's teaching would have completely vanished out of this of the universe, and would have nothing, not even a remnant. So when somebody Maitreya would have to come back and actually rediscover the whole technique again himself. Now that means you have to have an enormous strength, resilience. I mean, if you look at the history of the Buddha and the types of the difficulties, challenges that he had to face, it's just like incredible. Born as a prince, brought up in the luxurious, circumstances, then go out there and real, stuff. It's just a torturous journey. But then, because of the inner strength that Shakyamuni Buddha had cultivated because of the previous training, he was able to gain enough strength and then composure, and finally rediscover the middle path, and then, of course, eventually become Buddha. And Maitreya would be taking the same path and had to discover Buddha's teaching from the very scratch again. And in order to do that, very weak, somebody who's weak and immature in Dhamma, without a deep-seated implantation of these, virtues, karma, it's going to be very difficult. So, in a sense, you can see that Maitreya Buddha being Maitreya is being trained in doing all these taking important tasks in the presence of Buddha, so that if he trips, he gets wrong, of course, Buddha can correct it, and then, of course, give him the proper guidance and instruction, and so that in the future he would actually understand and remember those instructions. So that's actually, remember, as I said, I don't know the exact answer, because I haven't exact answer if you're looking for exact answer in the sort of book answer, but that's an answer that I can think of, a possible answer why he's one of the, he is taking one of the major roles as interlocutors in many of the suttas, playing an almost equal role with the Manjushri. Manjushri makes sense because he's the one who's excels in wisdom. Just like in Pali Sutta, you can see Shariputra is taking the Manjushri's role. It makes sense because the most wise disciple of Buddha represents Buddha's voice. Somebody who is a very devoted, dedicated to Buddha's teaching, but who is not very wise, who does not understand Buddha's teaching well, it's difficult for this person to represent Buddha's teaching genuinely. So authentic Buddha's teaching has to be represented by somebody who actually understands Buddha well. So Manjushri position we can understand, at least, there's a reason behind, logic behind that. In the Maitreya sense, he is not the smartest guy, at least in this sense, but still, of course, the role that he's given, partly has to do with his future epoch, future activity as Buddha. Does that answer? Somewhat. Okay.
Yes, thank you very much.
Thank you. All right, so we're going to go to okay, so I think we have a pretty big jump. Verses, these verses, remember, if you have noticed that they are paragraphs, and then verses are essentially sort of, in some cases, not always true, but mostly condensed way of putting the what is being discussed in the verses. In the paragraph. So therefore, we can skip much of it. And 163. Oh, the vast miraculous wisdom. Oh, the powerful spring being, the one who today emitted a single ray and revealed many thousand realms. So that's what we already read. And we are amazed to have, okay, not important. Okay, I think maybe 170. If you come there, Maitreya thus questioned the son of Jina. That son of Jina here is basically Manjushri, to delight the humans, merit, yakṣas, rakṣas, I don't know what the merit is, for assembly waited there and for the explanation that Manjushri would give. Then the Manjushri Kumara Putta said to the Bodhisattva Mahasattva Maitreya and the complete assembly of Bodhisattvas. So then, of course, finally, Manjushri speaks. Now, this is what he said. Manjushri replies Maitreya's question. Noble sons, Tathagata's intention is to relate to a great Dharma teaching. So, as we said, yes, the reason why he made this unique display, this unique miracle, is because he wants his intention. Now, sometimes this is a debate within the big debate among the Tibetan, let's say Tibetan Buddhists, especially Tibetan scholars, whether or not Buddha has intention. Most of the people say Buddha has no intention. This intention, remember, because generally intention is connected to the karma making. The reason why we create karma is because we have the intention. Intention is closely associated with the desire, and desire always, of course, one of the fundamental root that creates a karma. The question then is, do Buddhas have intention? If Buddhas have intention, what type of intention? Is it different from our intention that we have? Intention or motivation, basically technically taking them as a the same meaning. Most of the Tibetan scholars actually, I know perhaps Jirimbuchi's position is different. Other scholars, most of them basically take Buddha has no intention. Buddha is free from intention. Buddha is free from, in fact, mind and mental factors. We just studied, especially the debate, if you look debate between Tsongkhapa and his maybe first opponent, first rival, Thakchoe Lotsawa. One of the big debate is, yes, this one. Buddha, Jirimbuchi's idea, Jirimbu claims that Buddha has thoughts, but it doesn't have to be negative thoughts, doesn't have to be unethical thoughts, but nevertheless, Buddha do have thoughts. And thoughts has such a compassion, right? Compassion, empathy. If Buddhas don't have a compassion, empathy, and then what sort of Buddha we have? Whereas from Thakchoe Lotsawa's point of view, there's no, Buddhas don't have thoughts, because Buddha is one of the mark of becoming a Buddha is to be free from the movement of thoughts, thinking processes or thought processes. So so that's why I'm just basically alluding to you, in case if you're interested in this deep debate among the Tibetans, Tibetan scholars, on the issue of whether or not Buddhas have intention. Now here, of course, it very clearly says Buddha has intention, and Buddha's intention is to teach the reason why he basically performs the miracle is to basically to clearly show that his intended purpose is to give the teaching. So that's why he says, noble sons, the Tathagata's intention is to send down a great Dharma rain, to sound the great Dharma drum, to erect a great Dharma banner, to light the Dharma lamp, to blow the great Dharma blow the great Dharma conch, and to bear the great Dharma berry drum. Berry drum is another drum. I think might be have some certain significance. Noble sons, this is the intention Tathagata has formed today. In other words, the reason why he actually performed this miracle is because he wants to show, he has the intention to show, give a very important sermon. And then, of course, a lot of description you can see. The very different ways, the very elaborate ways in which to make it very honorific and grand. And this is partly, I think, the characteristic of the sutras. Noble sons, from the previous Tathagatas, there has come illumination with light like this. Remember, now he is basically, Manjushri is saying, previous Buddhas have done this, just as Shakyamuni Buddha is doing this. And he says, I think that just as it was revealed to me, just as I have been seen an omen of this kind in the past from the previous Tathagatas, Arahats, perfectly enlightened Buddhas. So previous Buddhas have done this, and exactly the same omen I'm seeing today. This Tathagata too intends to give great Dharma teaching to make others hear great Dharma teachings, and has therefore created such an omen. So that's the answer. The answer is the reason why he basically exhibited or miraculous, performed this miracle, exiting the light, is because of his intention, and that is to give a great sermon. Why is that? He says, the Tathagata, the Arahat. Remember, Tathagata, of course, is epithet. Arahat is another epithet, because Arahat, even though means individual liberation, right? Sometimes we could Arahat, somebody who has destroyed the foes, Arahat. Or sometimes, in fact, it is called, and the Tibetans usually use Arahat. Tibetan technical term interpretation is Dachampa, somebody who actually has smashed his enemies. Somebody who has smashed his enemies. Now, of course, that enemies, remember, can't be external enemies. There is no external enemies for Buddha. So therefore, the enemies that he smashed, or he was able to smash, are internal enemies, such as those passions or those kleshas that we're talking about. The Arat, the perfect enlightened Buddha, has revealed a miraculous omen of this kind, his illumination from a ray of light, because he intended to teach the Dharma that is not in accord with the entire world. So this is new thing, not in accord with the entire world, particularly those Pratyek Heras. So because it's a very unique teaching that he's going to present, so he performs this unique miracles. Noble sons, I remember that in the past. Now, basically, he shares his, Manjushri is sharing his experience. I remember that in the past, even the further back beyond incalculable, numberless, immeasurable, inconceivable, vast, completely countless, asankhya eon ago. Now, you can think about all the numbers and would be probably still not enough. At that time, in that era, they appeared in the world of Tathagata, the Arahat, the perfectly enlightened Buddha, the one with the perfect wisdom and conduct, the Sugata, the knower of the world, the unsurpassable guide who tamed beings, the teacher of gods and humans, the Buddha, the Bhagwan named Chandra Surya Pradipa. Now, Buddha Chandra Surya Pradipa, actually, Mitra says, did exactly what Buddha Shakyamuni was doing. Now, just a brief commentary on unpacking on this word, perfect wisdom and conduct. Now, this is important. Of course, Sanskrit was a Shila, right? Remember, Buddha essentially teaches only three things, three trainings. Buddha students are asked to do only three trainings. One is to cultivate wisdom, and in order to cultivate wisdom, one has to develop the single pointed concentration. One has to have a certain stable, concentrated mind, workable mind, serviceable mind. And in order to do that, one has to also cultivate a practice and some ethical background, ethical, virtuous activities. So let's put this way: when we talk about the virtuous conduct, ethical conduct, we're not talking about some following rules and regulations, certain protocols, certain performing rites and rituals, but it's basically activity of body, physical as well as mental activity that conforms, that are conducive to a single-pointed, single attentive mind. So if we, let's say, if we indulge in a self with unethical activities, such as maybe harming someone, of course we will always remain very mentally disturbed. And this disturbed mind, it is very difficult. With a disturbed mind, it is difficult to develop concentration. Samadhi is not possible. Without Shila, Samadhi is not possible. Without Samadhi, Panya is not possible. Pragya is not possible. Pragya is the wisdom. So wisdom depends on Samadhi, concentration, and the concentration arises from the Shila. Shila is the ethics, right? So ethics give rise to concentration, Samadhi give rise to wisdom, Pragya, and they play a role like a tripod. So if one is weak, then it is impossible. Now, of course, I can say with little confidence that having, as being a student of Vipassana for long, I can say with the confidence, if a Shila is weak, it is literally impossible to develop concentration. And without the concentration, it is impossible to generate deeper enough wisdom, deep wisdom that actually allows you to feel the impermanence. even to feel the in order to feel the impermanence, understand impermanence, you have to feel whole your body as a feeling. You have to be able to feel, actually experience the whole body, and then once you feel the whole body, you can look a little deeper, and then you realize that experience arises, passes away, arises, passes away. That is the first mark of impermanence. And that deep, and of course there's a lot more deeper to go, but that depth, at least, it's impossible without certain serenity, concentration, because mind needs to be sharp and single pointed. And in order to do that, one has to have a one has to have very strong ethical footing. And ethical footing doesn't mean stop. Of course it does. There are other things that is included with comportment and so forth, behavior and so forth. But most importantly, undisturbed mind, because when we have a disturbed mind, then it is impossible. With the disturbed mind, every nasty thing comes out. When we say, if you look, observe, and with mindfully, we always notice that whenever we say something nasty, that nastiness always comes out when we are mentally disturbed. So that nastiness, of course, is going to harm others, as a consequence. But most importantly, its first victim is ourselves. My anger victim, first and foremost victim, is myself. And then when I'm so angry and the anger rises up and it becomes so intense, and then maybe I start shouting or yelling or abusing, then of course other persons start becomes a victim, and in the second round. But the first victim is that this anger will definitely make my own psychological life very disturbed, and it is impossible now for me to have a peace, for me to enjoy what I'm doing. So, and essentially, ethics or Shila is all about having mastery over these disturbing mental psychological elements within oneself. So, of course, therefore, that's why Buddha's teaching, you can see, emphasize in the end, the goal is to become a master of oneself. But in order to develop the mastery, wisdom, one has to have a very strong ethical foundation. Without which, of course, none of this is possible. So that's why, of course, here explicit phrase is being used: the one with a perfect wisdom and conduct. Yes, Lindy, you have your hands up.
Thank you, Sonam. I just wanted to.
I think you are muted.
Oh no, unmuted. You can hear me now?
Not quite, not loud enough.
Oh, how about that? You can hear now?
You are far away.
Oh, far away.
I don't know.
Like that?
Very.
Not there. No.
Still not very clear.
It's okay. Oh, don't worry.
Now I think you're completely gone. Or is it problems from my side? I think you are actually muted. Actually, oh.
Yeah, I'm unmuted now, but don't worry. Okay.
Okay, now I can hear, yes.
Oh, you can hear me? Okay. Okay, Sonam, if you can hear my question now.
Oh, yes, now it's much better. Yep, okay.
Sorry for that. I was just wondering about the, that sort of foundation of ethics, when you're saying that, this, of course, is crucial to have. Is that just with when you're thinking of the foundation of ethics, is that the, not engaging in any actions that are causing harm? Is that sort of the very simplistic understanding of the ethics, that any actions of your body, speech, and mind are not causing harm to anybody, any sentient being?
Yeah, I think on a simpler level, yes, you can take that as a benchmark of ethical action. Any ethical action that prevents harming other beings, including oneself. Very important, though. Sentient beings, of course, you have to include yourself. So that would be a benchmark, a criteria of an ethical action, and any action that prevents harming or harming now in the and into the future, that will be ethical action. So some actions you might think that otherwise you might think that they might be harmful now, but actually in the long run they might be very good. So let's say if you sit and meditate, so painful, suffering, enormous suffering, but that suffering in a sense, of course, is almost like one of the necessary experience that one has to go through in order to become stronger. So let's say if you want to become if you want to have your body very have the flexibility to do all sorts of things, then of course we have to do a lot of exercises, and including jumping here and there and do all the acrobats, and they are painful in the beginning. But it is these exercises that actually makes us much more physically agile in the end. Similarly, when initial exercises, especially like retreat, when you take a retreat, or maybe if you have never meditated 1 hour, if you sit 1 hour today, and you will see it's like a worst punishment. First of all, your body will ache, and if you ask not to move, in fact, I remember that when I did the first 10-day retreat, teacher says on the 4th day, when he actually introduced actual Vipassana, and they says, now from today onwards, at least 3 hours a day, they were 1 hour sitting, what we call group sittings. And those hours we asked to sit and without any movement, no physical movement, no changing of the postures for those 3 hours. But other hours, of course, you can change hours. Just 1 hour. In the beginning, it looks so difficult, extremely difficult, because so much of pain. Initially, that looks like a punishment, incredible punishment. And some students do describe it as a punishment, worst type of punishment. And now, bodies and you feel as if your whole knee is breaking up or into pieces, because so much of pain. But then later on, if you actually, with the patience, if you keep on going, what happens is those painful experiences later on, gradually the pain, you realize that pain itself has, if you realize impermanence, you will notice that the pain has no solidity. Pain is actually a kind of constantly changing phenomena. Arises, passes, arises, passes, and a certain time will arrive when you actually notice that because of the long sitting commitment without movement whatsoever, you develop mental strength and stamina and also resilience to cope those painful experiences, and that is an enormous patience that one can cultivate directly. And then, of course, little things goes around their life because very easy to handle. So, in a sense, in the beginning, yes, those actions that might look harmful may turn out to be very, very helpful. So sometimes, of course, it's difficult. But one day, there's one yardstick for ordinary beings to differentiate between ethical and unethical action. And this, any action that is intended to harm others, if we don't have any intention whatsoever to harm others, and if it turns out that action, unintentional harm others, that's beyond our capability. So as long as we don't harbor any intention to harm others and then perform actions, that would be in the virtuous actions. Any action that has positive intention to help others, that's going to be virtuous actions. But any action that does not harm others intentionally, that would be also kind of negative way of describing ethical action, because you won't be doing anything unethically. So even though you are not doing anything sort of positively or actively, but you are at least not harming other beings. So this intention becomes very important. And that's why cetana, sometimes this intention, of course, Sanskrit word cetana is defined as karma. defining characteristic of karma for ordinary being is chetana. In other words, for ordinary beings, what is defining characteristic of karma? How will you define karma? Basically, you say it's intention, characteristic of intention. If you have positive intention not to harm others, that's a karma, a positive karma, ethically sound action. But if you have intention to harm others, that is unethical action and ethically unsound action. So that's a sort of simple way of judging. But of course, as we go deeper in the meditation with the training, then you will see actually things are much more complex, and because then you realize that intention alone is not enough, because all about you realize that you cannot harm others, you cannot perform unethical actions until and unless you harbor certain psychological states that are destructive to yourself. So that is unethical. Even though you haven't done anything else to other beings, you may not have harmed others, you haven't said nothing wrong, but you basically within yourself, so if you are deeply depressed, that is unethical, at least with respect to you. Because depression is not a flourishing with respect to the person who actually who's having it. Similarly, anger, hatred, even just anxiety or fear, they are unethical states, precisely because they are not nurturing. And so then what happens is, when you have a lot more and if you harbor them again and again, not only that actually it diminishes your own strength, but when you become weaker and weaker, and then it start encroaching the space of other beings, and that other beings will start get harmed. But the first victim of all our unethical states, unethical action, is always going to be the individual himself or herself. In the same way, the reverse argument is that whenever we cultivate a positive, say, mindset, psychological status, or even intention, health, or loving kindness, or positive feeling, or gratitude, or sense of appreciation, I am the beneficiary of my ethical thinking. So yeah, I mean, of course, that's why ethics has a different shades and different grades. In the initial stage, for ordinary beings, because if they are not meditative, if they are not mindful of what is happening, if they always think about the external behavior, because for ordinary beings, if somebody shouts and yell, that's action. If there's no shout and yell, there's no such thing called ethical and unethical action. It has to be visible outside. But for contemplatives, for meditators, it has to be much more richer, because it is what happens in your mind. That's the most important. That's the ground where ethical and unethical seeds are being planted. So therefore, for meditators, of course, it becomes very, very easy to understand whether you are being disturbed. If you are deeply disturbed, that is bad for us. And then the question is, how do you actually resolve that disturbance, inner disturbance? In fact, one of the defining marks of defilements is anything that disturbs you, anything that causes disturbance, anything that causes you distraction, that is a mark of defilements, klesha or nyumon. So any mental state that gives rise to that kind of thing, of course, would constitute as a nyumon. And anything that harbors afflictive states, that would be unethical, right? So that's, you can see, in fact, a little bit much deeper. Now, this is important, of course, discussion also to understand that sometimes even modern teachers, modern commentators think that Buddha is somehow ethically transcendent. Somehow ethics doesn't matter for Buddha. Buddha and Bodhisattvas, they are basically going beyond. There is no going beyond ethics. It is possible there because, I mean, if you say transcendent, then if you are saying that they don't need to think about ethics any longer because they are so developed, and it becomes their existence equals to being ethical. That's perfect fine. That makes, and this is exactly, to become Buddha, it literally means a model ethical person. Buddha is impossible to perform anything that is unethical, not to himself, not to any beings. So the very existence of Buddha is defined by the quality of being ethical, being a virtuous individual. And if that is a transcendent, that's perfectly fine. But somehow if you think that Buddha can do anything and there is no ethics implied, I mean, some modern times you have different teachers and do sometimes give the commentaries. And therefore sometimes Theravada, teachers criticize Tibetans, Tibetan teachers who talks about crazy wisdom generated from drinking, from alcohol. Sometimes they can't cope with that. So that need to be actually understood within the perspective. Okay. So I think we have. Sorry for a sort of longish answer to your question, Lindy.
Thank you very much, Sonam.
Okay.
Good.
Yep. So then I think now this is good also. And then he says he taught the Dharma. Now remember, of course, again we are back to the sutra. Maitri asked the question and Manjushri and answering. And Manjushri is basically said this is what Buddha did in the past. Chandra, Surya, Pradeepa Buddha did. And then he says, whenever Buddha gave a teaching, he says this, and this is nice actually ways of describing Buddha's teaching in a whole, sort of in a complete sense. He taught the Dharma that is good in the beginning, good in the end, good in the middle, and good in the end. Has excellent meaning and excellent words, and it is unalloyed, complete, pure, perfect, concerns pure conduct. Again, pure conduct, stress on the ethics. Of course, people will have a different take when you read and look at the description of Buddha teaching in this way. But from a student who actually follows Buddha teaching carefully, will understand what I meant. Okay, so now here is the point. Again, Manjushri is continuing. He says, to Srivakas, he taught the Dharma conjoined with the four truths of the Aryas and Nirvana as the ultimate goal, as well as the process of dependent origination, in order that they might transcend birth. Right. So basically, now this is where he makes the differentiation. So remember, we talked about last in a sitting. We talked about those three different goals the Buddhists can have: Sravaka, Pratyek Buddha, and Bodhisattva. And then, of course, you can add Buddha in the end. Buddha, becoming Buddha is the ultimate. But then in the middle, of course, you have to become to achieve individual liberation. You have to take Sravaka path, and that is Sravaka. He says Sravaka's teachings basically emphasize on Four Noble Truths, and all of us know Four Noble Truths, what they are. But remember, they are called Four Noble Truths. And sometimes there is another big misunderstanding, I think, misunderstanding, even among modern commentators, particularly among academics. They always say Four Truths. And they always think the Four Truths from the perspective of ordinary deluded beings like us. Because for us, there are no Four Truths. There's just only one truth. Everything that you see, they are truth. Pleasure is truth. Suffering is truth. Not in the deep level, right? But the reason why they are called Four Noble Truths is because these are truths from the perspective of somebody who actually understood what suffering is. Because somebody who understood what suffering is, the truth is not that suffering is real, but suffering, there is actually a deeper reason why suffering arises. So attachment is a suffering. For ordinary beings, attachment is not suffering. Attachment is a good thing. I mean, if there are thousands, millions books that are written to basically to emphasize that attachment is a great thing. You have to have more attachment because attachment is joy. Attachment brings a lot of joy and love and those things, right? So for ordinary beings, attachment is not a suffering. It is a source of joy. Whereas from noble standpoint, or noble being standpoint, when you go deeper into the attachment and then you realize, oh yes, okay, attachment looks joyful in the appearance on the outside, but actually, if you understand deeper, attachment is actually a source of suffering. Similar anger. How many of us would actually academics, even let's say in the nowadays in this world would take anger as our inappropriate mental states. Very few. Of course, they will say they'd always make difference. If it is a terrible, wrathful anger that is destructive, then it's bad. But some anger is always good. In fact, I just listened to a talk yesterday. It's all about, anger is ethical in some states, and that justifies it. But particularly anger with respect to preserving your identity. So if your identity is under attack, and then of course, it's anger to defend your identity. They would say it's perfectly fine. Now, so therefore, it is important that you have to understand these four noble truths, called noble truths because Arya Satya, not just truths, because it's a different perspective from ordinary beings and perspective of the noble beings. So that's the point. And then nirvana as the ultimate goal. For us, we are not interested in nirvana. We are perfectly ordinary beings, are perfectly content with the samsara, and that's what we are. We just want to be there. So remember, that's another point. And then also process of dependent origination. When you look at the dependent origination, you are basically deeply thinking about the causal series and sequence. The fact that everything arises because there's a causal relation. Cause leads to effects, effects leads to causes, and there's a cycle of loop, cause and effect, right? These are the deep insight Buddha emerges from Buddha's discovery, and he shares this to the Pratyek Buddhas, Srivakas, because these are the minimum requirement for somebody who actually wants to become liberated and transcend rebirth. Otherwise, rebirth occurs. So here on this phenomena, rebirth is a natural phenomena. As long as we have the causes that creates rebirth, rebirth will happen. Doesn't matter whether you believe in rebirth or not, because belief doesn't make much difference. If you believe, whether you believe that rebirth happens, or if you don't believe rebirth happens, or even if you deny rebirth, as long as we have attachment that act as the fuel to existence, rebirth will arise. I mean, look around the world. If you have a plant, let's say apple seed doesn't have a thought. It doesn't have a thought to say, oh yeah, next time I'm going to come back as apple in another part of the world. But it so happens that apple seed, the seed being carried away with the wind into a certain direction and come into sit in a certain location, and then after some time comes up, germinate. The thought doesn't count. What counts is the actual causal process, the seed, that actually is responsible for generating the effect, and namely rebirth. Okay, so if we don't want rebirth, if we don't want to come back again, then this project, Bodhisattva, the project that Buddha taught for Srivakas matters. Nirvana matters because nirvana basically takes us out from the process of birth, aging, sickness, death, misery, lamentation, suffering, unhappiness, and distress. And then, of course, there's the Bodhisattva's teaching. What do Manjushri says, Buddhas teach Bodhisattva these things. The Dharma that commences with the highest complete enlightenment conjoined with the perfect six perfections. Sometimes we talk about six perfections. Can anyone name those six perfections? I'm sure. Just on the top of your head?
Do a couple.
Yep, let's do it together.
Well, there's perfect wisdom.
Okay, so you want to go from top to bottom? That's fine. Yep. Okay. Perfect wisdom.
Perfect concentration.
Good. What next?
I don't know.
Perfect wisdom. Perfect wisdom comes from perfect concentration. Perfect concentration comes from perfect mindfulness. Yeah. Perfect mindfulness. Yeah. Perfect mindfulness comes from anybody?
Morality.
Meditation.
Oh yeah. Well, perfect comes concentration. Meditation is already gone.
Sheila.
So, a perfect mindfulness comes from perfect effort, right effort. And then effort comes from, or you can think from differently. Okay, so we got four first, four. And the second four,
Perseverance.
first one is, oh yeah, perseverance. Perseverance, maybe you could say actually it's the right effort. So the first one, usually you have perfect
Giving.
giving. Giving is the easier for ordinary beings, because even though we are not really meditators, giving is something that we can practice. Now, then next,
Patience.
ethics, yeah, sultim. Yeah, and then the patience. So now, combination of these six, you got six perfections. And then, of course, you can add like other four. Sometimes, of course, if you take 10 perfections, but mostly, of course, we talked about 6 perfections. But if you add tab melam tobishe, tab is the skillful means that we are talking about in this chapter, and the melam is melam doesn't make much sense actually if you look at it. Basically, aspiration, and then the 9th one was the power, and the 10th is going to be the perfect wisdom. So those are the special teachings basically taught to bodhisattvas, because once they train into 6 perfections or 10 perfections, then ultimately they're led to become a Buddha. Okay. All right. What are we doing? Okay. So we didn't have a break. Sorry, I didn't realize.
This is okay. Maybe we can take a 5-minute, 10-minute break.
Sure. Yeah. At this stage, yeah. Let's do that.
Okay.
People might need a toilet trip.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay.
God. Huh? Oh, you're junk. Don't call these things junk. It's junk. It's old junk. It's old rubbish. Don't call these things rubbish. I hope you're muted. That'd be very embarrassing if you're on. I think you're on.
Venerable, can you hear me?
Yes, Trent.
Oh, hello.
Hi.
I just wanted to ask, do you think the Gompa will be open tomorrow?
Well, it is every Sunday, unless
Oh,
it's snowing. Yes, between
yay. Okay,
1 and 4, 1 p.m. and 4
okay.
p.m. Mhm.
All right. I've just come back from Queensland, so I might just pop in. That would be lovely.
Beautiful.
Yep. Okay. Any questions at this stage? All right. So I take it that there is no questions now. So now, of course, we are in the midst of Manjushri sharing his experience and also basically explaining to Maitreya what are the things that this previous Buddha, Chandra Surya Pradipa, taught to Srivakas and then Bodhisattvas. So of course, you can see two different teachings were given because they have two different goals. Bodhisattva's goal is ultimately to become Buddha because that's the through the becoming Buddha they are able to make maximum contribution to the to other beings, whereas Srivakas apparently don't have the ultimate wish to come back again and again in the samsara. All right, so I think that so then we can skip now. I'm going to skip. Okay. 183 Ajita, that's to Maitreya. Manjushri addressed Maitreya as Ajita. At that time in the Bhagavan's teaching, there was a Bodhisattva Mahasattva named Varapabba who had 8,000 students. The Bhagavan rose from the samādhi and taught the Buddha Dharma teaching of a white lotus. Chandra Surya Pratibha taught, of course, the same thing when he emit or displays their vision. So essentially, because Shakyamuni Buddha did the same thing, emit ray from Una displaying or illuminating the whole cosmos of 18,000 different Buddha realms and Bodhisattva realms, then Manjushri basically saying that this Shakyamuni Buddha is going to do the same thing. When the Bhagavan, the Tathagata Arhat, I'm reading 1.84, the enlightened Buddha Chandra Surya Pratibha had taught for 60 intermediate aeons the Dharma teaching of the Great Extensive Sūtra called White Lotus of the Cloud, Lotus of the Good Dharma, which is an instruction for bodhisattvas that is possessed by. Now, of course, this White Lotus Sutta is designed, or at least is what specializes the teaching of bodhisattvas. So that's one thing. I think we can skip that. I think we can skip the whole chapter. Essentially, it's and then move to the chapter 2, the skill chapter. Now, if I'm not so sure, we will have full enough time to talk about go through important chapters, important points in this chapter. But let's start anyway. Remember, this is now literally Buddha. Of course, initially was deeply absorbed in meditation, illuminating the whole cosmos, and then Buddha Bhagwan mindfully and knowingly arose from the samadhi. Basically, he arose from samadhi. The point is, was deeply in meditation, and in the process of meditation, he performed this miracle. And then, of course, whole thing, the chapter 1 is basically happening behind when Buddha was deeply in samadhi, and then the dialogue between Maitreya and Manjushri and all things happen as sort of inside the inside the display and what happens. Having seen from it, he addressed brother Shariputra. Now remember, Shariputra in this life is Shariputra was the one who actually is going to request Buddha to teach. Shariputra, the wisdom of Buddha, which is profound, difficult to see, difficult to understand, has been realized by the Tathagatas, Arahat, perfectly enlightened Buddhas. Remember, they are always plural. Tathagatas, Arahats, perfectly enlightened Buddhas. So that means it is very important that these are the plural qualities of individuals who endow them, possess them. There is no monopoly of enlightenment or Buddha. There is no one individual who has the ownership of a Buddha. So that's why they're always in plural. It is difficult for all Srivakas and Pratik Buddhas to know. Now, this is now, of course, the difficult part is coming up essentially for Srivakas and Pratik Buddhas. Tathagatas who follow the Bodhisattva path, and then he eventually become Tathagata, of course, trained in the 10 perfections or the 6 perfections. And that actually becomes a little bit for, maybe too much for Srivakas at least this point. Why is that? Shariputra, remember, in this life, he is a Sravaka. He is just individual Arahant. He's Arahant, already liberated individual. So essentially, you got Buddha giving a teaching that is predominantly for the purpose of bodhisattvas, but the person who asked the question is, of course, Shariputra, who happened to be Srivaka. Shariputra, the Tathagatas, Arahats, perfectly enlightened Buddhas have served many 100,000 quintillions of Buddhas. They have practiced for the highest complete enlightenment with many 100,000 of quintillions of Buddhas. They have followed them for a long time. They have been diligent. They have obtained marvelous, amazing Dharma, and don't know the Dharma. That is difficult to know. Now, of course, the point being made is the argument being made. You could say, why is it difficult for Srivakas and Pratik Buddhas to understand the teaching of Lotus Sutra? Is because, at least the argument given is because the teaching that is designed here are for the Bodhisattvas who would eventually become Buddha. And the Buddhas know that because they have been training and undertaking the training for so long. And now they, in fact, they not only mentally in tune with the Dharma of that type of teaching, but also physiologically, literally, whole structure from the if you could say even the neurons physically they are in tune with that kind of teaching. So that actually becomes a little bit difficult for Pratik Buddhas and Srivakas, because they think that they assume that to achieve an individual liberation, Arahant is enough, good enough, and there is no reason for one to become Buddha. Shariputra, it is difficult to know the true meaning of the teachings given by the Tathagatas, Arahats, perfect enlightened beings. Why is that? They teach Dharma that they have understood themselves through the diversity of skill methods. So this is important. The second reason is that they cannot. It is difficult. Buddha's teachings are difficult for other people because Buddha teaches something that they have exclusively understood themselves from their own understanding, from their developing their own faculties, and that's why, of course, when as a student of Buddha have to train, we have to train it ourselves. We can't expect somehow Buddha is going to show his miracles and out of compassion is going to make me enlightened. On this project, it is impossible. Buddha can't do that. In fact, Buddha makes it very explicitly clear that Buddha is just a simple teacher who points the path, and it is us who actually have to walk the path in the end. Which means that The teachings are coming out exclusively from the exclusive realization, self-realization, which means because it is individual self-realization, one has to develop those things oneself. And when you try to teach, for example, like discussions that we are having at the moment, none of us had this kind of teaching, and even though I'm supposed to be instructor here, and so we are far away. But even you have a teacher, so who's fully enlightened, fully liberated, and who explains the teaching to us, we are no way, we won't be there to realize fully what is being taught, because language and concepts are not adequate enough to capture the sense, the meaning. It only gives you a certain idea, but it doesn't give the real experience, because in the end, it is the direct experience of the Buddha's teaching that actually makes, that realizes, that unfolds these changes and transformation. Because after all, Buddha's teaching is all about individual transformation, and that transformation is not about to unpack and unfold without having individual walk through the path. So that's why it is difficult. But of course, conceptually, we can make sense. They teach Dharma, they have understood in themselves through the diversity of skills. This is the point here. Now, remember, this is the skillful chapter. It's called Upaya Kaushalya. Skillful in the sense it's a skillful, not skillful precisely because from the ethical standpoint. Sometimes people might be very skilled, but usually for egocentric reason. But here, of course, you can see the reverse of that point. Buddhists want to cultivate that skill. And remember, skillful is one of the perfections. Tap melam tobishe. Tap is the seventh perfection. Skillful, perfection is the seventh, on the seventh ground. That's what they are taught. That's what they are training. So this is important, because in the end, if you become a Buddha, you got to hold one project, and that is to help other beings. So then, what are the things? What makes your teaching career successful? How can you help your student the best? If you are unable to use different skills, if you use just one path, one way, then that might not actually capture many interests of many other beings. So that means you are living out most, which means it is very important to have this skillful mastery, so that you can have a big, massive impact in a positive way for the positive transformation. So he says, vision of wisdom, illustration of causes. So these are the skills: vision of wisdom, illustration of causes and reasons, supports, expressions, mode of communication. All these are different types, right? Modes of communication. And sometimes our teacher says, basically very confident, Buddha speaks, right? Now this is, of course, only for the faithful. Buddha speaks any language for everyone, all the type of language that is spoken by the individual. So if you speak only Pali, you can understand Buddha's teaching from Pali standpoint. If you only speak from Tibetan, you can hear Buddha speak Tibetan. If you speak only Tamil, you will hear Buddha speaking Tamil. Now, for us, it might take a lot for us to actually believe this is the case. But nevertheless, for the traditionalist, for the faithful, yeah, this is the quality Buddha has. If you are fully enlightened, of course, there is nothing. And remember that you are supposed to be, you are also omniscient, and you also know exactly what you're thinking. Each Buddha has the omniscient quality of knowing anything that goes in the student's mind. So, either the student needs sign language, or sometimes yell, or sometimes a little bit of shout, or sometimes a little bit of wrathful expression, Buddha would know. At least this kind of a skill that we're talking about. But that is actually a little too much. Looks like that's too much for the Srivakas. At least in this, this is how Shariputra depicted. Through these skills and methods, they liberate this and that being here and there, and from attachment. So in the end, the liberation that we require is liberation from our own attachment, our fixations, And fixation could be identity fixation, that you are fixed, you're so fixated with your nationalism, so fixated with your regionalism, fixated with the sectarianism, fixated with your own personal identity, whether you're talking about you, whether you are talking about your country, whether you're talking about your religion, whether you're talking about your nation state, any fixation, that's what you call attachment, right? So freedom is actually the freedom from those fixation. And in order to take these fixations away, the Buddha has to have use various different means and tools, and that's why they are called skills. Through these skills in the method, they liberate this, and that being here and there from attachment. Remember, the from attachment, that's only one word, attachment, fixation, because attachment in the end is the real cause of suffering. And if you ask next time what is the cause of suffering, and it's from Buddhist standpoint, those three: poison, the poison of hatred, the cause of suffering; poison of attachment, another cause of suffering; and the fundamental primal cause of suffering is a confusion. Those three causes. And if you are basically liberated from attachment, of course, all three basically falls apart. Shariputra, Tathagatas, Arhats, perfectly enlightened Buddhas have reached the perfection of great skill in method and the highest vision of wisdom. So because Buddhas have this skill, they're able to display and use these skills to train the student. So that's the point Shariputra makes here. Okay, so that's 22. What else? And then I can jump to 226. And then it says, in that assembly, 200,000 great Srivakas. Now remember, now we are not talking about Manjushri's experience of the past, because that's the first chapter. Now here we are talking about our Shakyamuni Buddha and Shariputra in the sort of not necessarily kind of dialogue format, but actually Shariputra is the interlocutor, asks the question, and the Buddha answers. But in the assembly, he says, the sutra says 200,000 great Srivakas. Think about this in what vulture peak, 200,000. And Ajat Kondinya. Ajat Kondinya is Kondinya, of course, one of the first disciple of Buddha, who actually was the first person who became Arahant in Buddha's career. Because this happens in Sanat, when Buddha went there to teach to his first disciple. Not necessarily, initially they were not disciples, they were literally friends, colleagues. And then when Buddha got enlightened, he walked from Bodh Gaya to Sarnath and gave the first sermon on Dhammacakkappavattana, turning of the wheel or Dharma, where he taught Four Noble Truths. And just listing Four Noble Truths, and those 12, of course, there are 12 different sequences, and then, of course, Kondinya become Arahant. So therefore, he is regarded as the most, the elder at the point. Anyway, and then, of course, there are, now here, of course, nice thing is he had attained power, and also bhikshus, bhikshunis, upasakas, and upasikas, both ordained monks and ordained nuns, lay persons, lay men, upasakas, lay women, upasikas, right? They were present. And these are called, what do you call, four members of Buddhist community, Sangha community. Now, and in effect, it's so, of course, there are other things to talk about. I don't want to get caught in this, about whether or not nowadays in this contemporary world, people are interested whether Buddha was really interested in the welfare of women. Of course, introduce female monasticism as a part of the Buddhist community. And then, of course, sometimes people question, maybe because Buddha made women to abide by 8 dharmas, special heavy dharmas that monks don't have to observe, but nuns have to have special vows that they have to, precepts that they have to observe. Not only that, they have more precepts. Monks have 253 women of lot more, I think three something precepts, which means they look like discriminatory. And people do ask different types of questions, especially asking whether Buddha was literally gender biased in the beginning, whether it was a gender neutral. And one of the argument in favor that Buddha was not a gender bias is this: as soon as Buddha become enlightened, remember Mara comes and requests Buddha to pass away, and Buddha says, no, this is not the time, I won't listen. But then, and he said that in response to Mara's question, Buddha says this: I won't pass away until and unless all four of my monastic communities become established in Dhamma. Now, all four monastic community, if you look at this is basically Buddha become immediately after Buddha's enlightenment. This is the pronouncement that Buddha made. That it clearly shows that women, bhikshuni and bhikshuni, as well as upasikas, women lay disciples, are already in Buddha's mind, and Buddha already think about the monastic. And then at that time, there was no monastic community, not even the male community. As soon as become enlightened under Bodhi tree, Mara shows up and requests Buddha, now you basically you have done the job, you are fully enlightened, you have achieved your goal, please go away, please die. And that's the Mara request from the Mara. And the Buddha says, no, it's too early. I have a project, and my project is to make sure that all my monastic community, 4 members of a community, until unless they become established in Dhamma, I won't die. Now, if you take that argument seriously, and if that's the true pronouncement statement Buddha made, then it is very clear that actually Buddha, there is not a slight gender biasness in Buddha's teaching, because from the very beginning, Buddha was determined to actually make sure that without sexual discrimination, gender discrimination, both male and female, whether monastics or non-monastic, he wants to share and make them sure that they are self-reliant. And then he says, and then of course, his dying advice is that be yourself your own island. There is not a slightest sort of discriminated word. So these are sometimes I think it's interesting to just to have a perspective. Because nowadays when people think about gender equality, we tend to think it's such a modern idea. It wasn't. It was not. Gender equality was on the top of Buddha's. And in fact, he might not have thought about gender equality. He just thought that all are sentient beings, human beings, equally equipped with the cognitive capability to become free from suffering. That's all matters. Male, female doesn't make a difference nowadays. Of course, even we are in a much more interesting world. Male and female, they are not enough. There has to be something there or different pronouns. He or she is no longer enough. A noun descriptor. You need to have something that is gender non-gendered words need to be introduced into vocabulary. Anyway, so that's I thought some sort of relation, but it's nevertheless important just to get inspired by this an amazing individual, whether you believe him to be a perfectly enlightened being or not, but at least what he has done, of course, we need to appreciate. Okay, and then this dharma, he says, dharma, this profound dharma is attainment of Buddhahood, and it's difficult for all Srivakas, Pratyek Buddhas to understand. The Bhagavan has said that there is not one liberation, and we have to obtain the Buddha's dharma, and we have attained nirvana, yet do not know the meaning of what the Bhagavan has said. Well, this is the real qualm, right? Remember Srivakas, all Srivakas, Arhants, they're already liberated, but then still not too sure what Buddha's teaching and the content of Buddha's teaching. So they, of course, doubt. And so Brother Shariputra, knowing that the fourfold retinue, they basically translate fourfold retinue, was uncertain in doubt at that time, and they said words to the Bhagwan. Bhagwan, what is the cause and what is the reason why the Bhagwan has this, as in this way, repeatedly praised the teaching of Dharma of being wise in skill in methods, and repeatedly said that I have realized this profound Dharma and it's difficult to know the intent meaning of these teachings. The point is this, because Buddha emphasized so much on the skillful means, and then he said this skillful meaning is difficult for Srivakas to understand. They were still at loss. What's the big deal? What's going on? And so, of course, they asked this question again and again. I've never before heard this Dharma teaching. Now, this is Shariputra, right? Shariputra has been along, at least serving Buddha, not less than attendant, but one of the most senior students serving Buddha, for most part of his life. And he said, I have never before heard the Dharma teaching from the Bhagwan. Also, the fourfold retinue is uncertain and in doubt. What is the Tathagata's intended meaning? So basically, they are kind of lost, and they couldn't figure out what this skillful teaching is all about. And I request, Shariputra says, I request that the Bhagwan explain perfectly the profound Dharma of the Tathagata, of which you have repeatedly spoken. Okay. So that's, again, Shariputra requesting Buddha. And this is what Buddha said in reply, 239. When Shariputra thus spoken, the Bhagwan asked him, Shariputra, why should I teach this? Why should I teach this? What would be the reason? And Shariputra, if I were to teach the meaning of this, it would alarm this world with its devas. So you can see actually there's some seriousness of this teaching. It's so something so new, it's going to cause alarm. And it did cause alarm. And the 500 arahants leaves on the spot. As soon as Buddha started teaching, basically 500 arahants leave. The brother, and then he said the brother Shariputra for the second reason. And then, of course, Shariputra asked and requested the second time. And he said, second time he made his request to Bhagwan, saying that, Bhagwan, I request that you teach this morning, this meaning. I request that, okay, again, let me go to the third request where he made the third request. And that third request is made in 243. Then the brother Shariputra made the third request of Bhagwan, saying, I request that the Bhagwan, teach. And then he says here, Supreme Human, teach the Dharma. I, your senior son, make this request to you. Here there are present billions of beings who will have faith in the Dharma you teach. Basically, Shariputra's justification, reason why she would teach is because even though many of the people will not understand, but then there are some other intelligent beings who would be able to understand Buddha's teaching. So please, so remember in ancient time, in some sort of Buddhist practices, that Buddha has to always request 3 times. Sometimes Tibetans have kind of picked up that, I don't know, maybe because of the influence of India. So you most time, even if you have to offer the tea, you have to ask 3 times. You offer first tea, they will say no. You have to say it second time, they will say no. And if you ask third time, they'll accept. Maybe they're still copying Buddha's modus operandi. This is how Buddha operates. And usually when the Buddha concedes, Buddha acknowledges, then he stays silent. Buddha doesn't say anything, and that is a sign that means that actually he accepted. So on the third time, Buddha accepted, and he said nothing. Third time, and then of course he says, Shariputra, now that you have made this request to the Tathagata 3 times, I said that what I had to say about your request. Therefore, Shariputra, listen carefully and remember, for I will give you the teaching. So only after third request, then Buddha accepted, and then he said he's going to teach. As soon as the Bhagwan, now here is the alarm. that caused. And he says, as soon as the Bhagavan had consented, more than 500 arrogant bhikkhus, bhikshunis, upasakas and upasikas. It's not like monks and nuns. It's just equal. They are lay people, as well, monks as well as nuns. Basically, what happened was upasaka and upasikas within that assembly rose from their seats, bowed down their heads to the Bhagavan's feet, and they departed from the assembly. They had enough. They don't want to hear about the teaching on the skillful means. As a result of their arrogance, they believed that they had obtained roots of merit when they had not obtained them. Now, this is Shariputra's description, or basically it is present in the sutra. Those individuals who are aligned to Srivaka individuals, especially Pratyek Buddha, they think that because they understood Buddha's teaching, what had to be understood, they understood. So what's the point of listening to brand new teaching, and believe that they had realization when they did not have that realization. So that's why they adopt here as an arrogant disciples. They had become aware of their own error and departed from that assembly, and the Bhagavan giving his permission to do so by remaining silent. And then as soon as they start living, of course, Buddha stood there silently. That means Buddha approved their departure. If you protest, you could say, sit down. I have something important to talk to you. You haven't heard this. But Buddha was not interested because they don't have the vessel. They don't have the interest to listen. So even you basically ask them to listen, they won't. Nothing would go in. So therefore, idea is that just Buddha gave them then permission to leave, and that's where these 500 disciples leave without listening to Buddha's teaching. Then the Bhagavan said to the brother, Shariputra, my assembly here has become free of these drags. Drags? What does drags mean? Lindy, I heard these people it's a drag. I've never actually encountered myself in written, but here it is. What does it mean? I can't hear. I think
I'm not sure what. Let me think. You were saying a drag.
Yeah, drags. It says we no. I mean, I'm reading 249.
Yeah.
And it said we become free from its drags. DREGS.
Dregs. Well, when we think of dregs here, it means like the end of something, the like you have a full cup of tea, and then maybe there are tea leaves left in the bottom, and you say this is the dregs left. Once you've drunk all of the tea, then what's left is
drag. Okay. So rubbish.
Rubbish.
Yeah.
A little bit what you might throw out. Yeah.
Okay. So basically, bad stuff are gone now. All the only remain is the stainless pure. Anyway, that looks like that's so bad guys have left. So we have a good assembly. That's probably the point that Buddha was making. Shariputra, it has become free from those who were worthless, while those for whom faith is essential remain. It is good that those who are arrogant have departed. Therefore, Shariputra, I shall teach that meaning. Now, I think we are run out of time. So with that drag, I think
that word is used in this time and now still being used now, isn't it, as an understanding?
Yeah. I heard this many times. I mean, people use it colloquially. And often say it's real drag, isn't it? Something like that. I sort of usually assume that there's something to do, bad, but maybe yes, it is this connotation of some bad. I should have looked at the Tibetan. Kamala, you have something to say?
Isn't that expression? I think drag. It's DRAG rather than EG.
No, I think it's different. Dreg is the rubbish at the bottom. A drag is someone who drags stuff back.
Okay, so that's good. So
there's also there's a term used that is a little bit like an insult. like the dregs of society. Some people say that undesirable people are the dregs of society, like the sediment.
Yeah. So that's the EG. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's the EG. Okay. Okay. That's thank you. That was good.
But the AG is quite different, you know.
Yeah, it
If you're
is.
viewed as a drag, it's something, you know, unwanted and not needed, not enjoying, isn't it?
Okay.
Oh, it's
Okay.
a drag.
Maybe it's both.
So both,
It's got a shared sort of.
both words have some sort of pejorative sense, right? In that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, look, Tenzin has said here, the dictionary says the most worthless part or parts of something. Worthless.
Okay.
So that's
I can't see the chat
in the
box,
chat.
so I don't remember.
Yeah. Okay. Worthless.
Okay. That's good. Well, I think we are run out of time, so it's so maybe here with drag as an endpoint. We'll have to come back from this next time, I think. So basically, we went through. I mean, it's only 2 events. Buddha, you know, so far Buddha, you know, displayed the miracle, and then it illuminated the whole world, and that raises a lot of questions. And then, of course, Manjushri asked. Maitri asked Manjushri the question, and then, of course, then Manjushri brought us, enlightened us, or illuminated us from his previous experience what that actually meant. And then, of course, and he basically said he's going to give teaching on Lotus Sutra. This is a very important sutra, and this is exactly what happened in the past. The Buddhas have done it. And then, of course, in the chapter 2, which we were in the middle, Buddha woke up from his deep samadhi. And then there, of course, when he woke up, Shariputra requested 3 times both Buddhas to explain, of course, this, particularly the emphasis on skillful means. And that's where we are at the moment. And of course, we haven't seen Buddha, what actual discourse Buddha has given. So from, I think, in our next sitting, if we can continue from here, then we should be able to get deeper into Jnana, Ekayana. So we haven't got to Ekayana yet, namely the idea that there is only one Jnana. That's going to be the final teaching of, remember, that's the teaching that Buddha basically warns here, that everybody, well, it's not going to be popular. It's going to cause some horror in the minds of beings who have never heard this. So that is to come in our next session. So I think that's where we can stop here. Perfect.
Thank you, Sonam. I think it's so wonderful. So we continue reading into chapter 3.
Exactly. So yes, do read chapter 3, and along with the chapter 4. I mean, we are walking slowly, but who knows if we somehow jump. And it's possible that sometimes they are not, because we don't want to hang. I mean, idea is we want to go and read the passages most interesting, which has lot more unpacking needed. But if it is description or other things, then I think we can skip usually. Yeah. That doesn't mean that sutra other parts are important. It is, that doesn't mean that others parts are unimportant, but actually that we don't have enough time to spend too long in each chapter. So read chapter 3 and chapter 4 just to prepare, and then see you in the next
month.
Next month.
Yeah.
Okay, I'll stop sharing that.
Thank you, Sonam. You are able to lead us in a dedication, meditation, final, closing.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you everyone for patient listening. Right. So let's do a brief dedication. Start again with your breath, coming back to your breathing. Start with deep appreciation for the fact that you are able to spend an hour or 2 hours and a half on learning, discussing about Dharma. When you feel relaxed, calm, and collected, very privileged opportunity that most of the world population don't have that time. And along with you can remember the kindness of Buddha, Dharma, Sangha. Feel the gratitude because of the hard work he has done, the discovery that he made, and he shared with other beings. We can study them, not only study them, but follow them and seriously practice them to make our life better. To make life more meaningful. To make us stronger from within. Deep sense of appreciation. Deep sense of happiness. And deep sense of self-respect to yourself. That you were able to take this important time out. Now you want to share the warmth, the inner warmth, for the good of others. The merits that you have accumulated for the good of others. And you can think about, imagine or visualize, in this case, all your loved ones sitting in the first row, around you, and from the depth of your heart, radiating a light towards all your loved ones, your neighbors, your colleagues. And the second row, and then you can think about all the rest of humanity, sentient beings. In other rows, and you can radiate the feeling of love, care, and share with them, share the joy. May all beings be free from suffering. In all directions, may all beings be free from the causes of suffering, such as anger, hatred, ignorance, prejudice, biases, discrimination. May I be free from suffering, causes of suffering. Ask forgiveness for those mistakes, the faults, intentionally, unintentionally, if you have hurt anyone, because you said something or you have done something and somebody got hurt in the process. Seek the forgiveness deeply. Say sorry from depth of your heart for the mistake, unintentional, intentional, that cause harm to other beings. Your husband, your neighbors, your children, ask their forgiveness. And make a resolution that I will be careful. I will be mindful next time. Whenever I speak a word, do something, I won't speak a word, do anything that would intentionally, unintentionally harm others. Make this pledge to yourself. And then also forgive those who may have hurt you, offended you, done something that have directly or indirectly caused you harm, made you angry. May I have enough inner strength to forgive the person. the perpetrator, the offender. Seek forgiveness. And forgive those who have done you wrong. Understanding that they are just like us, sometimes make mistakes. And through that, intentionally, unintentionally, get us hurt. May I have inner strength to be strong, not to harm others, and not to be irritated, agitated, nor to be reactive when somebody harms me, somebody says something nasty. May I mindfully observe my mind, train it in mindfulness, dwell with equanimity, with a mental balance. In all situations. And may all beings be equipped with such skill. Resilience, patience, may all beings be happy, always associated with the cause of happiness. May all beings be free from prejudice, biases. And may all beings realize their ultimate potential. Ultimate potential. Beneficial for themselves, beneficial for others. May all beings be free, liberated, be free and liberated. Bhavatu sarvamangalam. Bhavatu sarvamangalam. Bhavatu sarvamangalam. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. Okay. Pujite, thank you.
Jay, thank you so much, Sonam. Wonderful session again. And our next session is May the 15th. So
May the 15th.
yeah.
Oh, okay.
Is that okay?
Is that the third week? Oh, okay. Hopefully, May 15th.
Yeah. The third Saturday of every month. That's how we've scheduled it for now. But we can always be flexible with you for whatever other commitments you have. We can move things around.
May the 15th.
So just let me know.
Yep. All right. Okay. Thank you.
Okay.
See
Thank
you
you so
on
much.
May 15th.
All right. Thank you so very much.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Everybody for joining. You're wonderful. We'll see you again.
Tuesday.
Tuesday.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye, Sonam. Thank you so much.
Bye, Sonam. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Hello, Axel. Hello, Ali.
Hello.
Hi, Lindy.
Hello, Dan. Nice to see you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you. Bye-bye.